All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in on this special live stream on this very special community call. 2025 has been a really amazing year at Bob, and we thought an amazing year like that also deserves a very amazing live stream and a very amazing community call. So here we are. I'm obviously joined by Alexei, Bob co-founder. We have a very special presentation prepared for everyone. And we have a very special agenda. We're going to go through some interesting recaps, dive into the Bob vision, go through some of the awesome moments from the Bob community side. And we also have a very special community representation. DeFi God, who is one of the most popular Bob community members, is going to be joining us, talking about Bob governance and also asking some questions on behalf of the community. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. Don't forget to speed this stream link out. It's going to be recorded, so if any of your friends are missing, they can always catch it later. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Alexei to join the stage and start the presentation.
Cool. Thanks. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening in, and basically just ahead of the holidays and ahead of the new year. The idea for today's call is to give an update of where we are with Bob, what we've achieved this year, and what's coming up next in 2026. So we'll start with a first recap of Bob in 2025, what we've achieved, and obviously then remind everybody of Bob's vision and the Bob stack, what we're building, what the roadmap is, share some latest updates, and then walk everybody through the 2026 blueprint and what are the big things that are coming that we're working on. And afterwards, we'll talk about Bob governance and how you can get involved and help us form the future of Bitcoin DeFi with Bob. So 2025 was like a super exciting year for Bob, and we celebrated our first year of Mainnet this year. We became the first hybrid ZK rollup and achieved quite a few other things that I quickly want to run through. One of the biggest achievements on the technical side was Bob becoming the first hybrid ZK rollup between Bitcoin and Ethereum, using ZK proofs in a smart way to essentially improve security of the system. And this is already now live connected to Ethereum, and we're working in parallel to enable Bitcoin finality for this as well. We launched Bob Gateway to enable BTC to flow freely into DeFi with just one transaction. So instead of always having to figure out which bridge to use, which wrapper, and there's 50 wrappers across 50 different chains, and there is no easy way for users to actually get WBTC or CBBTC or some of these other wrappers. Bob collaborated with Layer 0 and BitGo to enable users to go from Bitcoin into wrap BTC and also then DeFi positions across 11 different chains with just a single transaction. And Bob Gateway to this date has processed over 68,000 transactions this way from 30,000 users, which clearly shows demand for Bitcoin DeFi across different chains, and Bob essentially being the main gateway to get Bitcoin into DeFi. On the Bob chain, we celebrated 40 million transactions completed on chain from over 550,000 active users, which is a huge success and tremendous growth throughout the year, especially thinking that the Bob network is still super young and it only turned 1 year in May 2025. We also finally launched the Bob token, and were able to secure listings from top exchanges, including Coinbase, Kraken, BitHub, Binance Alpha, Gate, KuCoin, but also on perps from Binance, BitGet, Bybit, and many others, ensuring that anyone who is interested to participate in Bob, become a protocol owner and get engaged in governance, start participating in securing the system, is able to access the Bob token easily across essentially some of the biggest exchanges in the space. We were able to successfully raise additional capital throughout this year, putting the funding that is available to build and develop the ecosystem to a total of $25 million, and the last one being through a successful community sale in November. And this year marked Bob reaching #1 in the Bitcoin L2 and sidechain space in terms of DeFi TVL and on-chain DeFi activity. And we intend to continue growing on the DeFi side and rolling out more products into 2026. But that was just like a very short overview. There's so many things that happened this year. It's very hard to get them all into a single presentation. We created the BitVM Alliance, onboarding 20 plus institutional partners to accelerate the adoption of BitVM. We hosted multiple events and educated big institutions on why BitVM is so important for the future of Bitcoin and Bitcoin DeFi. And we actually won the Bitcoin Research Award 2025 for our work on the BitVM 2 research paper that is essentially the fundamental for the future of native Bitcoin DeFi, and that is today being used by both Bob, but also 5-6 other teams already. We successfully integrated and partnered with major institutions, including Fireblocks, Anchorage, and also Chainlink. We launched a lot of new upgrades to the Bob Gateway product, as already mentioned, starting with custom actions where you can trigger custom integrations, custom DeFi activity across different chains with a single Bitcoin transactions. So think of, you have Bitcoin, you want to borrow stables on Aave on Ethereum. Through Bob Gateway, you can do this with a single transaction. You don't need to worry about wrapping, unwrapping, clicking across 5 different interfaces. So we've simplified access for users in Bitcoin to Bitcoin DeFi. We've also made a lot of progress on BitVM itself. So most recently, we were able to reduce costs of BitVM down to $10 for essentially executing challenges. This is a significant improvement to where we were last year. When BitVM was first launched, there was a lot of criticism of this being expensive and not practical. And this is now completely solved. BitVM is practical, it is cheap, and it's definitely coming to mainnet in 2026. And that's a great success of the Bob engineering team together, obviously, with contributions from members of the BitVM Alliance, but also of the BitVM Technical Alliance that Bob is a member of. Last but not least, something to point out before we move on is that Bob has exceeded 100 million Bob tokens staked from over 3,000 stakers already less than a month after launch, which just highlights the strengths of the Bob community and the number of people who are actively engaged and long-term believers in Bitcoin DeFi, that Bitcoin really does need DeFi and that solutions are, like Bob, are super important for the future of finance. We've also been very active, and I think we've met quite a few of you in person throughout this year. We hosted events across the world, not only at big conferences, but we hosted a lot of local meetups, and big thanks goes to our community evangelists and guardians and community managers who have made this all possible and have helped us build out the Bob community across the world, across essentially almost all continents at this point, except for Antarctica, and have helped us understand better how people use Bitcoin, what do they care about, and how can we build the best possible product to unlock Bitcoin DeFi for millions and millions of people worldwide. And now I just want to take a few minutes to remind everyone of Bob's vision, why we're doing this, and what actually Bob is all about, and what have we set out to create. And if we look back at where Bitcoin comes from and how Bitcoin emerged out of the essentially aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And if we look at our today's financial system, banks are, in our opinion, outdated technology, right? Your money earns little, you have no control over it at the end of the day, while banks take all the profits and control who has access to the financial system and who doesn't, and regularly have to get bailed out because of mismanagement, intransparencies, and essentially unlawful activities. And the problem with this is that you don't have control over your funds, right? You don't control what the bank does with your money. And that's what Bitcoin set out to change. Bitcoin set out to change money as we know it. It's your assets, your coins. Nobody can steal them from you. The supply is finite. It's fully predefined. No one can decide to print more money than a 21 million Bitcoin easily. It's a much better asset. It's by now the biggest and largest digital asset out there, but it's also essentially the most important asset of our generation, right? Where previous generations bought into gold, where obviously that is still widely controlled by traditional banks and institutions, Bitcoin finally managed to break through these chains. But unfortunately, most of Bitcoin remains idle, right? Today, we have BTC, we have global adoption, but Bitcoin does not have DeFi. If you want to use your Bitcoin for anything else than payments, you will ultimately have to trust somebody else, be it your centralized exchange, be it a custodian or bridge operator. You will have to give away custody of your Bitcoin, and your Bitcoin will be at risk. And for the last decade, we've seen more than enough situations where custodial services have failed. And while custodial services and exchanges play an important role in the adoption of Bitcoin and crypto, they're not the future of Bitcoin. Bitcoin needs DeFi. Bitcoin must be usable in a decentralized manner. And that is why we're building Bob. We're building Bob to essentially do to Bitcoin what neobanks did to fiat money. Our goal is to take Bitcoin and make it usable, make it easy to access, and build a platform where you can spend your Bitcoin, you can use it for build savings accounts, you can earn on it, you can borrow against it, you can buy it, you can trade it, all powered by Bitcoin security, and ensuring that your keys and your coins remain yours, and that there is no single centralized entity that can take control over your assets, staying true to Bitcoin's vision. Bob's mission is to build an open network that is fully verifiable, open source, without centralized banks, without IOUs, where the same rules apply to everybody, code is law, and you don't have to worry about your assets. And you can essentially buy BTC, hold it, and put it to work and do more with it without having to always go back to the old traditional financial system. Today, we have ETFs, we have DATs, we have treasury companies. Banks are moving into Bitcoin. Banks are starting to acquire BTC. Banks are trying to potentially control Bitcoin. And in our opinion, there must be an alternative. And that is why we're building the Bank of Bitcoin. We're building an alternative to banks that are holding BTC today. And our goal is to essentially compete with them and offer users who care about decentralization, who are forced to care about decentralization, to have a place where they can buy, hold, and use their Bitcoin in a secure manner. And that is what Bob stands for. The stack that we're building is open source and it has 3 layers. And this will get a bit technical, so bear with me, but it's actually quite important to explain so everybody can understand of what we're building and how this works. At the base layer, we have the protocol layer, and that's where we're building the Bitcoin DeFi fundamentals. Here we have the hybrid ZK rollup construction, which essentially positions Bob as the best of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bob's hybrid ZK rollup allows us to have native connections to Ethereum on one side and tap into the DeFi powerhouse of the space, where you have so much liquidity, so many users, and also the majority of stablecoins minted in the space. But at the same time, with BitVM, we can create a system where we can accept native Bitcoin deposits. Bitcoin on Bob will be Bitcoin. Just like ETH on Arbitrum is called ETH because you can withdraw it to Ethereum and it's secured by ZK or fraud proofs, BitVM allows us to do the same thing for Bitcoin. It allows us to create a way for you to deposit Bitcoin onto Bob and always get it out secured by fraud proofs on Bitcoin. And that is a huge step in terms of creating self-custodial, trust minimized, native, whatever you want to call it, DeFi use cases for Bitcoin. And then to essentially make this all usable, so you as a user don't have to worry about running custom software, getting involved in low-level technical operations, we have a solver network. Solvers essentially allow you to swap your Bitcoin directly into Bitcoin on Bob or final already ready positions in DeFi vaults and DeFi lending or DeFi liquidity provision positions with just one transaction. Solvers are the ones who will engage with running the technical side of the protocol. They handle minting and they help users to get in and get out of the system without having to deal with the complexities. This is already very widely adopted on Ethereum and other layer ones and layer twos. Mostly this is known as intents, right? The best way to move assets between different L1s and L2s, Ethereum, Arbitrum, Solana, Optimism, Base, is using intents where you can swap your assets on Ethereum into assets on Solana, go from a lending position on Solana into a LP position on Base, all within one transaction, where you tell your intent, you explain what you want, and the solver network will help you deliver it. Now, what we've done is we've built the first real Bitcoin intents protocol for Bitcoin, where we use trust minimized cross-chain swaps to allow you to go from BTC into Bitcoin in DeFi, wherever you want to go, whether it's on Bob, on Ethereum, on Binance Smart Chain, whether it's into a wrapper, a staking position, a lending position, it's all wrapped into a single transaction. And this essentially is combined at the front side or the front end side where the users interact with this with a very simple interface where you just specify your intent and you're good to go. Now, on top of this, we build a gateway layer, right? So we have the core infrastructure that powers the Bob, that's the chain, it's BitVM, it's the solvers. And on top of that, we essentially build tools for protocols and businesses to integrate. We have an EVM execution environment where we work with some of the biggest DeFi protocols in the space, for example, Uniswap, and partner with some of the biggest institutions to provide easy access to essentially for institutions to use these DeFi primitives, so Anchorage and Fireblocks as examples here. And the mission here is to make sure that using Bob or building on Bob is the same as building on Base or Arbitrum, right? We've leveled the playing field. We've made sure that you don't have to choose between building on Bitcoin or building on Ethereum. You can build on Bob and get the best of both worlds. Best infrastructure, but at the same time, access to Bitcoin tooling, access to Bitcoin liquidity, and essentially a way for you to unlock new users, Bitcoin holders, and millions of them into your application. And this is all packaged into the Bob SDK, which makes it super easy to integrate into wallets, into apps, into other front ends, allowing you builders and developers to get access to these products without having to deal with low-level engineering efforts. It's a plug-and-play system, super easy to use, and allows you to start integrating and building on Bitcoin basically right away. And then last but not least, something we call the user layer, where the mission is to ensure frictionless distribution and allow you to access Bitcoin DeFi, not just on Bob, but on any major chain. And this is where we have intents, where as already explained, you can move your Bitcoin in and out, 11 chains today, directly to BTC, powered by Bob Gateway. So you don't even have to work, you don't even know that you're using Bob, but you might actually be today when you swap BTC for stablecoins or something else. And then last but not least, and this brings me to some of the most exciting developments that we have this year and something that we'll be working on heavily next year are vaults. Vaults essentially can mean two things. It can mean vaults where we secure your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, but it can also mean a very easy way for you to deploy your BTC into a strategy where everything happens in the background, just like you would invest in an ETF or, put your dollars to work in the bank or invest into some fund. Vaults essentially allow us to tokenize strategies that generate yield on BTC. There's different strategies, some of them which use derivatives, on-chain trading, off-chain trading, staking. And the goal is that we can provide a unified experience for users who want to earn on their Bitcoin, educate you about the risks, make sure you understand what you're doing, but ultimately the decision is up to you. And so please do your own research. But vaults will play a crucial role in the future of Bitcoin DeFi because they abstract complexity and make Bitcoin DeFi accessible to retail users. Deploy BTC in one transaction, start earning yield, start staking it. So why are we building this, right? What's the opportunity? Well, Bob's hybrid chain is live today with around 200 to 240 million on-chain deposits, right? But we're just getting started. The next step is to really get to the same level of native Bitcoin in DeFi as we have native ETH in DeFi. If you look at Ethereum and ETH as an asset today, around 30% of ETH is actively used in staking, in DeFi, basically powering the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. Now, while there's $30 billion of Bitcoin wrapped into chains like Ethereum, Solana, and so on, only 0.3% of BTC is actually natively, arguably natively used or staked in Bitcoin today. And there's only a few protocols that offer this. It's super early, but even the 0.3% is already a huge market. And the goal is to scale that from 6 billion, which is the current size of BTC staked in these protocols, which are still super early in the early stages, to 600 billion, which basically would level the playing field and put Bitcoin staked at 30% at the same amount of basically the same proportion as you have in Ethereum. And that is the opportunity that we're pursuing. And that's why we're so excited about Bitcoin DeFi, because we see the demand on Ethereum. We see how successful it is. And we see the demand on Bitcoin. We see how many people are trying to wrap BTC into DeFi on different chains, struggling, taking a lot of risk, dealing with complexities. And we firmly believe that by unlocking native Bitcoin DeFi, we can finally bridge this gap and unlock this 100x opportunity for Bitcoin to scale and outperform and outsize all that we've seen in DeFi and Ethereum today. And ultimately, with us betting on Bitcoin continuing to grow and the demand for Bitcoin continuing to increase, looking at the geopolitical and the economical situation around the world, when we build the bank of Bitcoin, when we start essentially capturing not just crypto users, but millions and millions of households who want to diversify their assets, who want to de-risk and hedge against inflation, and essentially take full control of their assets and full control of their money and switch to Bitcoin, that's when our goal is that Bob is there and offers you the same tools that your bank does, but in a fully decentralized manner. And ultimately, we can play with numbers, but long-term, we think this is a multi-trillion-dollar market, not just for Bob, but for all Bitcoin DeFi players to capture. And just like neobanks emerged and took the banking space and the fintech space by a storm, so will Bitcoin DeFi protocols as well. And building essentially the bank of Bitcoin, in our opinion, is the best way to do that and to compete and offer a successful and stable alternative to the traditional financial system. And the way we achieve this is, if we look at a roadmap, we achieve this in 3 phases. We start with the hybrid chain, and this is more or less completed. Arguably, there's always work to be done on the technical side, but it's pretty clear. It's a solved problem. We know what we need to do. Bob is already live on Mainnet. We've pioneered the Bitcoin hybrid chain. We've figured out how to use BitVM. We figured out how to build native Bitcoin vaults. And we've established a technological advantage with both tech and contributing to some of the most important research in the space and bringing on institutional partners who have now taken a bet on BitVM and have understood that native Bitcoin DeFi is the future of BTC. And right now and throughout 2026, the focus will be on the gateway to Bitcoin DeFi. This phase means building the middleware to ensure that institutions, businesses, users, wallets, apps can get frictionless access to Bitcoin DeFi primitives. And this means building out Bob Gateway, making sure that you can not only bridge, but also swap Bitcoin into any asset on any chain, one-click deploy into all major protocols, and work with some of the biggest wallets and aggregators to make sure that we provide them with a cheap, fast, and efficient way to go from Bitcoin into DeFi and other assets and back in a non-custodial manner with trust minimized swaps. And at the same time, build out yield vaults that allow you to generate yield on your Bitcoin in a secure manner where you have full transparency, but you can also use these tokenized positions in DeFi to benefit from DeFi composability, replicating and ideally outperforming what we've already seen with ETH and ETH LSTs on Ethereum. And then once we have built this middleware, once we have onboarded businesses and essentially become the main distribution player for BTC in DeFi, then it is time to start moving into banking, as basically probably most of you know it. And that means offering native Bitcoin lending markets, offering stable coins, building out these swaps, and building on top of that, building out savings accounts, credit cards, and essentially microfinancing. One of my personal dreams would be to have a credit card where I can take out microloans against some BTC, which are self-repaying. If the Bitcoin price goes up, it doesn't force me to sell my Bitcoin. It allows me to buy more BTC instead of holding cash, which constantly devalues, and essentially build out, diversify, and use my Bitcoin, however, productively, and be able to tap into that liquidity when I need to. And all of that should be powered by decentralized infrastructure where I control my Bitcoin. I have control over what happens with them, and I don't need to trust anybody to do so. And that is ultimately what we intend to build in phase 3 with Bob. Which brings me to the latest updates. We've explained the vision, we've seen where we're going, and as we go into 2026, we've had some major releases towards the end of this year, which will shape the future of Bob next year. And basically, I just want to quickly highlight those. This week, we have announced the native Bitcoin Vault stack. The native Bitcoin Vault stack is an open source piece of infrastructure that allows or should allow users to borrow against their Bitcoin in a way that retains self-custody, where Bitcoin stays on Bitcoin, and if you repay your loan, you will get exactly your coins back. Sure, if you default, if you don't repay your loan, then your counterparty will liquidate you. And as that's part of the agreement that you're entering when you're borrowing against your Bitcoin. But if you repay your loan, if you return and you basically repay your debt and you want to take out your Bitcoin collateral, you can do that. And not only will you get BTC back, you'll get exactly the same coins back that you put into the system. And this means no commingling of funds. This means unilateral exit as long as you are honest, right? If you try to cheat, that system will also prevent this. As long as you're honest and not cheating, you can get your Bitcoin back. And our ambition is to essentially integrate this into permissionless lending markets such as Aave v4, more for Euler next year, and to start offering users, institutions to essentially use Bitcoin that today sits idle because they cannot or will not use wrappers on Bitcoin and DeFi protocols yet. Allow them to finally use their Bitcoin in a way that allows them to get access to on-chain strategies, on-chain rates, and bridge the gap between off-chain lending rates and on-chain lending rates for Bitcoin. And for those who are familiar with DeFi, the rates on Aave, for example, for borrowing stables against BTC are multiples lower than what you see off-chain actually. Because on-chain markets are more efficient, they're 24/7 active, they're transparent, and they're ultimately better than off-chain lending markets. And Aave has shown that by becoming the most dominant DeFi protocol in the industry, outgrowing some of the top 50 banks in terms of size. And our mission is to essentially bridge this gap for Bitcoin as well. Initially, we will start with an institutional setup, start with an MVP, onboard institutional partners, and make sure that the first version will be tailored to institutions, and together with these institutional operators, then upgrade from an institutional set of operators to full BitVM, where essentially your assets are secured cryptographically. Check out the blog, read up on this. This is definitely going to be one of the things shaping Bitcoin DeFi next year. Another big announcement that we've made actually just today is native Bitcoin swaps on Bob Gateway. Well, previously, Bob Gateway served as an on-ramp and off-ramp from Bitcoin into DeFi. So you could go from BTC into Bitcoin wrappers and DeFi positions. Now we've enabled swaps. Our goal is to make sure that Bob is the cheapest, fastest, and most efficient way to trade Bitcoin against other assets, ETH, USDC, USDT, across all major chains in a non-custodial manner. Bob Gateway is powered by Bitcoin Intense, which essentially means trust minimized cross-chain atomic swaps. We use very cool proof technology, which allows us to verify Bitcoin transactions. The way it works if I have Bitcoin and I want to swap with Bob Gateway, I initiate the order, I get the deposit address, I send my Bitcoin, but at the same time, Wrap BTC or another routing asset or stable coins are locked up in a contract. Once my Bitcoin transaction is verified on Bitcoin, the smart contract verifies that I have sent the BTC. I don't need to trust the operator in this case. The smart contract cryptographically checks that Bitcoin has been delivered and unlocks the assets. And the way Gateway works is that we plug into major existing bridge providers like Layer0 to support them on their mission to unlock cross-chain capabilities of different assets, including Bitcoin. And this way, we can now support not only Bitcoin to Wrap BTC swaps, but actually Bitcoin to ETH, to USD, and to USDC, initially on Ethereum and Base, with more chains and more routes being added over the next couple of weeks. This is also live for builders. You can start integrating this. There's an API which allows you to plug this in and replace some of the essentially trusted and centralized BTCs on and off-ramp providers with something trust minimized, efficient, and secure. And we've actually launched a referral program, and that allows you to participate and help us onboard more users, get more testers, get more feedback, and actually get a share of the volumes that your referees actually do in trading. And what I can also say that there'll be prizes for testers and early users who give feedback. So definitely check this out and on the Bob website under Gateway. And yeah, start trading Bitcoin trust minimized right away. And then last but not least, I've already briefly touched upon this, but I think it's always important to also highlight the work that's going on in the background that users might not see, but has a significant impact on the success of Bob. We've been contributing to BitVM essentially since Robin Linus came up with the idea. And again, it's always important to highlight Robin's contribution to the space, because I don't think anyone had expected that we could hack essentially something like ZK proofs and fraud proofs into Bitcoin script until he showed that it can be done. And we started working together, first on BitVM 2 and now also contributing to BitVM 3. And most recently, Bob's engineering team reduced the on-chain proving costs for BitVM 3 by 87%, resulting in costs of only $10 to actually do a dispute. This means that when we essentially use native Bitcoin on Bob, powered by BitVM, if there is a dispute, it costs only $10 to trigger the challenge, which means it's accessible not only to big institutions and big node operators, as is the case in many ETH L2s, where I think fraud proofs on some of these chains costs tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually execute. With BitVM 3 and the latest version, triggering a challenge and actually executing the process is affordable to retail users, to anyone who wants to participate, making sure that it's actually secure and does not rely on big players collaborating and being honest. It means that anyone with a little bit of capital can actually trigger challenges and make sure the system is secure. And this means we're essentially almost there in terms of having a full practical version for Mainnet. And that's the goal for 2026. The goal is to finally get BitVM onto Mainnet and unlock native Bitcoin DeFi. So, giving a quick outlook on 2026 and summarizing the roadmap so far. In 2025, I already talked quite a bit about what has been happening, what we've been doing. We've had a token launch, staking went live. The Bob DAO is starting to go live. We've announced a native Bitcoin Vault stack. We've launched Gateway multi-chain swaps. That's just been the last month. I already talked quite a bit about the achievements this year, and you can find a lot more of these things on our blog if you check it out. For 2026, the next big step is to continue expanding Bob Gateway. There's quite a bit of refactoring and optimizations going on under the hood. We will be able to support large orders. So if you are a large Bitcoin holder and you want to do a swap, we'll be able to process that sequentially. So you don't have to split up your order manually. You can say, I want to trade 10 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin eventually. You can place the order and it will be processed in the background without you having to worry and come online. We'll also continue integrating into other strategies, and we'll be announcing quite a few exciting integrations that build on top of Gateway that make trading Bitcoin across different chains and deploying it into DeFi even better, powered by AI agents and even better aggregators. And there's some really exciting teams that we've been working with that we can't wait to reveal in early 2026. Our intention is then to work on kickstarting the Bob Boost Accelerate program for teams that build on Gateway and on native Bitcoin vaults and want to unlock native Bitcoin DeFi and work with us on a day-to-day basis so we can support you on your mission and essentially be your partner for native Bitcoin DeFi. We already work with some of the leading DeFi protocols like Uniswap. We help wallet providers like Wallet Connect with their Bitcoin development. And we're looking for more players and teams who essentially either are fully focused on Bitcoin DeFi or want to expand into Bitcoin and develop a Bitcoin strategy, where we can provide the necessary tools and expertise and help them essentially bring native Bitcoin liquidity into their ecosystem. Throughout 2026, there's a few other big milestones that we aim to achieve. One of them will be releasing native Bitcoin vaults, so allowing you to borrow against native BTC as previously described. The initial setup with institutions is set to go live in Q1, and then with mid 2026 as a target, the goal is to roll this out with BitVM. In parallel, we'll continue working on Bitcoin finality and then finalizing that development, making sure that Bob will be the first chain to settle and have finality, or specifically have finality to be correct, from both Ethereum and Bitcoin, paving the path to full native Bitcoin DeFi, and at the same time having native access to all assets that are on Ethereum, including ETH and stablecoins. And later, then towards end of 2026, we then expect to go live with hybrid staking, where we then package everything into the Bob staking model. And we'll be able to share more details in 2026, but that's a first sneak preview of what's coming. And then, why should you care? Why should you work with Bob? Why are you even listening to this conversation here? Bob has been in this space for quite some time. Me personally, I've had the chance to work on Bitcoin for over 10 years. And throughout this time, we've been able to establish thought and technical leadership. We've contributed to some of the most important Bitcoin developments in the space, namely BitVM. We co-authored the BitVM 2 paper. We're contributing to the core BitVM 3 implementation, constantly optimizing and bringing in institutional operators, making sure that the big institution, the big players understand the importance of BitVM, are educated, and essentially participate in this and help us get Bitcoin DeFi off the ground. We've invented the hybrid architecture that has later been adopted by quite a few other players in the space, essentially combining the best of Bitcoin and Ethereum, or Bitcoin and another chain. And we essentially have shown how to build this in practice and in production. We built the first ever Bitcoin intense protocol that allows you to go from Bitcoin into DeFi and DeFi deployments on other chains, and essentially also enable super efficient and frictionless cross-chain swaps. And all of this combined allows us to not just have Bob as a chain and hope for others to build on top, which so often is the case with layer 2s and layer 1s. No, Bob has unique products. Bob has unique revenue streams, and that will allow us to build a long-term sustainable ecosystem with revenue from swaps, revenue from vaults, revenue from hybrid the native Bitcoin vaults, and essentially also revenue from on-chain DeFi activity. And this ultimately should all accrue to the DAO. And that is why, by combining all these things, Bob is essentially, in our opinion, but of course we're biased, but in our opinion, we have the best shot at building the Bank of Bitcoin.
All right, awesome. That was a really, really interesting summary. As Alexei said, we've done a lot of interesting stuff in 2025. The new vision slides and all of that stuff has been crafted with a lot of intention. So for the next part, we have a very, very popular Bob community member, DeFi God, who's going to be joining on behalf of the Bob community. This is something that we want to keep doing every community call we do. It's obviously unfeasible to have all of you join the live stream, but we'll try to get someone on behalf of the community to come and represent the interest of the community, ask a few questions to Alexei. And for this one, especially, DeFi God is going to go through some slides about Bob governance, give a little bit of an overview of what's coming in terms of Bob governance, how delegation works. So yeah, with that being said, welcome to the stream, DeFi God. It's a pleasure to have you on this live stream. Also, I want to thank you for your support that you've been giving to the Bob ecosystem. Why don't you just start with a few lines about yourself and then go into the Bob governance side of things?
Sure, yeah. Nice to be here, Alexei and Pankaj. Yeah, on my side, I'm an active core community member for Bob. I'm recently delegator since TGE. I am based in Buenos Aires, so basically I know a lot about the Latin market. I'll dive deeper into that. I've really started on Bob since I signed my first transaction on basically when Mainnet was launched back in I think May 2024. So been really involved. It's been almost a year and a half, and really glad to be where I am and how Bob has grown over this last year and a half. It's great, and seeing the pipeline for 2026, a lot of good things are coming. So happy to be here. And in terms of the Bob DAO, it's been live since TGE. People can delegate over since then, and proposals are gonna be starting in Q1 2026. So really eager to start on that. And the Bob DAO is focused on a community-driven initiative, basically to accelerate Bitcoin adoption. The mission is to establish Bitcoin as the funding of as the foundation of decentralized finance, with both through collective action through strategic funding. And some of the core focus areas is DeFi, basically unlocking new decentralized financial products and improve user experience. And I think that is really important because Bitcoin by nature is not a yielding asset, and DeFi unlocks a lot of opportunities through vaults or basically supplying Bitcoin and borrowing stablecoins against it, and running strategies above that to earn yield, or even to avoid selling Bitcoin and basically spending those stablecoins and keeping your Bitcoin as collateral. And in terms of technical, Alexei has gone a lot through the different technical things that are going on the background, such as BitVM or the gateway. And I think in terms of growth and ecosystem, it's important to grow adoption, awareness, and community engagement, because sometimes DeFi can be quite cumbersome for some, and if that can be watered down to institutions or even retail, it unlocks a lot of opportunities over there. And why does governance matter? Basically, the decisions are made collectively by token holders, and the governance ensures that the DAO remains transparent, decentralized, and accountable. And on the next slide, we can see some of delegates, which are right now we're about more than 50 delegates from different parts of the world, such as Nigeria, Turkey, the US, different parts of Europe, Latam, Argentina. I think it's a really big bag of delegators with bringing different views from different parts of the world. Particularly for me in Argentina, where we have the Argentine peso, which is quite a currency that basically loses a lot of its value each year. I always remember that even in the worst years of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin crashes like 50% year over year, the Argentine peso actually performed worse. So in Argentina and Latam, a lot of people used to invest by buying dollars, but as we know, also the dollar loses value, and and I think Bitcoin kind of breaks that. At least you preserve your capital, and in most cases, you even earn more. Not financial advice, of course, and yeah, that delegates ensure the decisions reflect the community and guide proposals for the DAOs. And you can delegate right now on Tally, so feel free to go there. And if you have some Bob staked or idle on your wallet, feel free to go over there. And now jumping on to community questions for Alexei, we can start where do you see the biggest unlock coming from in the Bob stack? The gateway, vaults, or intent?
Well, first of all, thank you again for joining and for helping us, form the Bob DAO and for being such an active community member. Super exciting to, see the Bob DAO emerge and get so many delegates from different countries in the world, because I think, Bitcoin means different things to everybody. And I think, the only way for Bob to succeed is to have input from different community members and better understand how people use BTC, because that's the only way for us to build a good product based on user feedback. So yeah, thanks again for participating. As for your question, I think the biggest unlock comes from both of them, and that's probably a very diplomatic answer, not picking one of two things that I'm very excited about, because they actually work very well together, and they actually serve different purposes. I think initially, short term, we'll see a lot of activity from Bob Gateway and a lot of growth there, because you see so much demand for Bitcoin DeFi already as it is, right? Wrappers are being created, vaults are being created. Every big chain has a Bitcoin DeFi strategy. Every big DeFi protocol has a Bitcoin DeFi strategy. And Gateway is live, Gateway is in production. And right now we're doing is iterative improvements, fine-tuning it. There are a few very cool things that I think could be major unlocks, such as instant trading. Right now you have to wait for Bitcoin to be sent. It takes sometimes up to 10 minutes for Bitcoin transaction to be confirmed. We're working on making this instant, but keeping it non-custodial, which is very challenging, but we think we have a solution to that. So I think in the short term, Gateway will be a very big unlock. It will allow, because it allows Bob essentially to benefit from Bitcoin DeFi growth, not just in our ecosystem, but across the entire space, positioning us at the center of essentially Bitcoin DeFi growth. In the midterm, we see a lot of potential in the vaults. It will take a bit more time to spin them up because it's obviously a bit more complex. But if you look at the sheer amount of Bitcoin that is loaned off-chain or like deployed on centralized exchanges or into off-chain protocol, like off-chain lenders to borrow stables and get capital, and how many attempts are being right now made with vaults and different wrappers to try to bridge that gap, and all of them are, not all of them are actually very transparent. Not all of them are super usable. And I think we see a huge opportunity in providing a stack that is open source, adopted by institutional partners, where you can essentially choose your security model. You can use BitVM for trust minimization. I think that has a lot of potential, but BitVM will take some time, right? I think it's very important to be honest where we are today. Ethereum took 5 years to go from idea or like first real rollup. BitVM was like, arguably, in my opinion, like the clock started ticking when we released the BitVM 2 technical paper, because that was the first time it became clear how to build it. It's been just a bit more than a year, maybe 1.5 years since then, if at all, since it became really clear how to do it. So I think we're moving very, very fast already. And I think vaults have a lot of potential and a huge unlock for Bitcoin DeFi. So I think it will start with Gateway, but then vaults will become a very big part of the ecosystem. But the cool thing is that Gateway is actually a very good UX improvement on top of vaults, just abstracting complexity there as well, allowing you to deploy into these vaults with just one transaction.
Yeah, following up on vaults, I think they do make sense, and eventually you can even tap to exchange earned programs, and basically people who have Bitcoin on exchanges can eventually earn yield. And following up for the next question, for Bob, what is the biggest practical advantage of being a hybrid chain plus gateway to Bitcoin DeFi that we'll see play out in 2026 compared to other Bitcoin L2s?
I think one of the lessons we learned is the building tech is not enough, right? We previously built trust minimized bridges, and we did really our best to build technology that's very secure, but it was built on a stack that wasn't sustainable. It was built on something that, where UX and product was not put into like primary perspective. And we learned the hard way, the very, very hard way, that, you have to build in a way that you cater to users and you go where users are, and you don't force them to change their behavior. And the myth of let's build it and users will come is just not true, right? You have to build something that works and people care about. And the only way of doing that is while listening to the feedback. And I always bring Lightning as a counterexample. Lightning is great technology. Arguably, it's the only real Bitcoin layer 2 today, right? Because it's the same transactions that are done off-chain. It's the same Bitcoin transactions that you can publish on-chain. But Lightning is complex. Lightning only does payments. It's very hard to use. No retail user understands it. And as a result, 70% of Lightning volume is done through custodial wallets where there is no benefit of using Lightning at all. You could just use their custodial service. And we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that when we build something decentralized, it is usable. And that's why we built Bob as a hybrid chain. And the advantage of Bob being a hybrid is that we take away the choice from the builder. Previously, right? If you wanted to build on Bitcoin, you have to go deal with the layer 1 architecture, BTC, Bitcoin script, no DeFi tooling, very limited wallet support, and all these complexities. Whereas a DeFi builder who goes to Ethereum has this a lot out of the box and they can focus on the product. And by being a hybrid, that means in EVM chain with the best-in-class infrastructure, we take away that problem, right? You can now build on Bob, tap into Bitcoin tooling, but you can use EVM and it's easy for existing protocols to deploy over, but it de-risks it for builders, right? Like it's easy for a builder to get started on Bob because we optimize for the success case. Build with us, let's be successful together. If it doesn't work, you won't go down with us, right? You can go and you can deploy somewhere else. And I think optimizing for ease of onboarding and getting started faster and being successful and focusing on product is much better than optimizing, like for forcing people to build custom architecture that they build up so much technical depth with a custom stack that they can never get out. And the other thing with being a hybrid is being able to tap into Ethereum's ecosystem. Network effects are key. Forking an EVM and building it in isolation doesn't work. It's been tried before, but if you want to build DeFi benefits from composability. DeFi benefits from being tightly integrated with different protocols and people being able to move funds in and out. And that's why for Bob, also being an Ethereum L2 is super, super important. We see ETH as the powerhouse of DeFi. There's no other chain has managed to challenge Ethereum that way, just like no other chain has managed to challenge Bitcoin as an asset. And by combining these two things in one platform, we believe that we can offer the best of both worlds. We can work with builders, get them and help them get the product to market fast, but for the first time ever, unlock native Bitcoin liquidity, which you cannot really do on Ethereum L2s. And if you build, and that's like many other Bitcoin L2s chose the path of building only on Bitcoin in isolation. They take the EVM, but it's separate. It's not connected to Ethereum. And that, in our opinion, is a disadvantage and it's a risk because you build in isolation. There is no easy way to move assets in and out. If you want to connect to exchanges, they have to support not only the native token, but they have to add support for wrapped assets, stable coins. You don't get that out of the box as a new protocol. You have to fight and you have to grow a lot for an exchange to consider adding native USDC like withdrawals. With Bob, we don't worry about this because we get this all through Ethereum. You can move in and out of Bob easily from any big exchange, move assets in and out through our connection to Ethereum, which solves a lot of UX and onboarding problems. And I think that's a huge advantage. It just takes away so much friction for users. You don't have to worry about these things. You can just focus on the product.
Awesome. So I know, Sir DeFi God, you have to drop off. So I just want to thank you for coming in and representing the Bob community. I know I'm going to see you around. So I can take over the last two questions that we have from the community side. So for
I've been talking too much, haven't I? Too long answers.
No, I think it's perfect. That question did require some context. So just jumping into the next question. For Bob community members who feel too small, whether they matter or not, what are one or two concrete ways, in your opinion, Alexei, in the way that they can already influence or do their part in supporting the Bob's vision as of today?
I think there is no such thing as a too small community member, right? You don't have to be a whale to contribute to protocol and have an important role. There's multiple ways to get engaged with Bob. On one hand, there's governance, right? And being an active governance delegate, coming up with suggestions, engaging with the development process, helping us, explain to the world of what we're building, why we're building. That already alone, is a very important task, and allows you to actually take a very, very important position in the Bob ecosystem. And we've seen in many other protocols that early DAO participants actually become very influential and very important for the future of the protocol, and obviously become very important members and contributors to the ecosystem, and play a key role in the future of the protocol. At the same time, you can also be an early tester. You can help us improve products, and we always look for feedback on right now the swaps, and there's actually a referral program where you can refer your friends and benefit from that. There also will be prizes and raffles, just ways for us to say thank you for people who take their time to give feedback, because time is valuable, and it's very important for us to be respectful of everybody's time. So I think if you're investing your time, that's valuable to us, no matter whether you're a whale or whether you're a Bitcoin enthusiast or whether you're a new user that's just interested. We appreciate it, and governance is definitely the one place to have a lot of impact, or giving product feedback and experimenting. And essentially, what Pankaj hasn't yet mentioned is there is a community program with evangelists, guardians, where core community members can essentially take up more important roles and help us essentially host events, represent Bob at other conferences, represent us in front of other communities, and basically carry the vision. And when I say us, I mean Bob as a community. It's not the team, right? Like, Bob is decentralized at this point, and everybody has a right to their opinion of how Bob should be run. And we obviously like to hear it. And then if the community agrees with your idea, it may actually be implemented.
That is true. I've been keeping some alpha for 2026, but yes, we do have some really interesting stuff going on the community side. Always feel free to reach out to me. I can always help out. We can figure out a way to get you involved in the community side again. All right. So final question for the special live stream. Also, just want to mention that we are at 900 live listeners. And I have to say, this is just amazing. Really appreciate everyone joining in. So one last question for the special live stream, Alexei. If you could leave everyone here with just one message about Bob and Bitcoin DeFi going into 2026, what would it be?
I think it's important to kind of talk about like how high Bitcoin L2s were, and then the hype died a bit down. And the interesting part is that crypto is very cyclical, but Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin is always there, no matter what hype thing comes out in crypto, whether it's meme coins, perp dexes, AI bots. Bitcoin is always there, and it takes patience, it takes grit, because you're building for something that has real adoption, where there's millions of users relying on Bitcoin day to day. And winning in Bitcoin means you don't just win in a niche, you win the entire market, because it is the biggest market out there. And I think, that's why we continue building on Bitcoin. That's why Bob will not pivot into anything else. We believe that BTC is the future of DeFi, it's the future of finance. And our job is to make sure that Bitcoin has a decentralized DeFi ecosystem. And in 2026, it will be, I think, the year when a lot of things unlock for Bitcoin, right? There's been a lot of work going on. There's been years and years of community changes in the Bitcoin space. There's been years and years of shifts ever since Bitcoin, I would say, entered the dark ages after the block size wars. It took us so much time to get into this renaissance phase. And I think at this point, we're there, right? We're basically heading into industrialization of the Bitcoin ecosystem. We're heading into a world where institutions, retail users, everybody wants a piece of BTC, but there is very few people who know how to do decentralized. There's very few tools and products out there that offer you secure non-custodial access. And from our opinion, that's why we'll keep building on this. The teams that get this right will win big and unlock a huge opportunity in this market. So whether you believe in Bob or Bitcoin DeFi, I think, paying attention to the Bitcoin space definitely is a must, whether you're, a Solana maxi, an ETH maxi, or whatever. Bitcoin's always going to be there. And as I already said, every big chain wants Bitcoin. And I think what we'll see by the end of next year is that every ecosystem in the space, in every major ecosystem, will have a way to access Bitcoin in a more native way than they have today.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Alexei, for doing this special community call and a special live stream. I've been saying special the word a lot of times on this live stream because it has been a very special year. And we're just so excited for 2026. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of shipping. But we'll see you there. And again, just want to say thank you. We've reached around 1,600 live listeners on this special live stream. There's going to be a recording that you can share with your friends in case they missed it. But otherwise, happy holidays, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.